The Tower card bursts into the tarot deck like a divine slap in the face, sharp, sudden, and impossible to ignore. Two figures plummet from a blazing structure, their fall echoing a universal truth. The ego, when built on illusion, must collapse. This isn't just some medieval drama. It's your job loss, your breakup, your panic attack at 3 a.m. It's the psyche getting a divine lightning bolt to say enough. The symbolism screams spiritual crisis, but underneath it all, there's a strange kind of liberation hiding in the rubble. Think about it. How often do we build towers of identity, only to watch them crumble? That job title, that relationship, that political label. They're mental skyscrapers we climb until we mistake the top floor for heaven itself. Then boom, divine intervention. It's humbling, but also sacred. The tower's collapse isn't punishment, it's grace in disguise. Just like the story of the Tower of Babel, our pride becomes our undoing when we try to reach divinity through ego instead of essence. And here's the twist most people miss. The lightning isn't just destruction, it's a divine touch, a spark of God, cleaving through illusion, forcing truth into our tightly sealed windows. When Jung speaks of individuation, this is it in its most violent stage. The ego screams, the unconscious rises, and chaos becomes the entry point to higher order. In Hebrew scripture, the prophet Isaiah experienced this divine voltage too, trembling before something far greater than himself. The tower doesn't just fall in the abstract. It falls in you, in me, in anyone bold or stubborn, enough to build a life out of avoidance and image. You feel it when your curated social feed becomes unbearable. When the person you thought would save you walks away. When you realize your beliefs were just borrowed bricks. Spiritual awakening isn't gentle. It's architectural demolition. But the ground exposed is fertile, ready for roots rather than walls. Maison Dieu, the older name for the tower, means house of God. Ironic, right? Because that house has to fall for the divine to actually enter. You don't get to keep the walls and see the miracle. You either live inside the illusion or leap into the unknown. And once the fall begins, there's no going back to the old view. But what comes next? That's when myth and history collide, opening the door to truths far older than the card itself. Historical and mythological context. Long before tarot decks, there were towers, real and symbolic, built by men trying to reach heaven with stone and ego. Nimrod, the legendary builder of Babel, wasn't just stacking bricks, he was challenging divine order. That tower became a cosmic offense, and its fall a mythic reminder that arrogance breeds chaos. The tarot's tower card inherits this legacy. It's not just a metaphor. It's a retelling of humanity's ancient obsession with control and the divine's uncompromising reminder that it plays by different rules. Sumerian mythology adds even more texture to this symbolism. In their cosmology, ziggurats weren't just architecture. They were portals, sacred stairways linking Earth to the divine. But when those structures became monuments to human pride rather than devotion, the gods responded with thunder. Joseph Campbell would call this the moment the hero's world shatters, when the old story dies and the real quest begins. The tower, in this sense, is less of an end and more of a sacred rupture. Jung understood this rupture well. He spoke of lightning as a symbol of sudden consciousness, a violent gift from the unconscious. It's what happens when your inner world no longer tolerates the lies you've told yourself. That's why the tower isn't just historical, it's personal. It's the breaking of every false sanctuary, every self-concept built on inherited expectations. And in this storm, the psyche trembles not because it's dying, but because something deeper is finally being born. Lightning, after all, is not random. It follows unseen paths, striking exactly where pressure has built too long. Think of it like the collapse of outdated beliefs. Maybe it's a religion that no longer fits, or a career that once gave purpose but now breeds numbness. In tarot, the divine lightning doesn't ask for permission, it acts. It's a sacred interruption. Zeus's thunderbolts in Greek mythology carried the same message. The gods are watching, and they will intervene when the cosmic balance is at risk. Alfred Jeremias once noted that ancient temples were less about worship and more about alignment, with stars, seasons, and spiritual laws. When alignment breaks, chaos rushes in. That's the tower. It's not moral punishment, but metaphysical reordering. And the ruins it leaves behind? They're raw material for the next phase of individuation. But before healing, before rebuilding, there's something we must face: the spiritual and psychological walls we've trapped ourselves inside. Spiritual and psychological isolation. The tower isn't just an external collapse. It's often the implosion of the inner fortress we didn't even know we were trapped inside. Psychological isolation can feel deceptively safe. You build routines, ideologies, polished personas, and suddenly, without meaning to, you've walled yourself off from instinct, emotion, and connection. It's the devouring mother disguised as comfort, feeding the ego while severing it from the lover, the tribe, the sacred chaos of life itself. Look around, and you'll see these towers everywhere. Glass buildings and cities packed with people who haven't spoken to each other in weeks. Minds locked in digital echo chambers. Souls numbed by the ideology of productivity. These are the new sanctuaries of confinement, structured not in stone, but in belief systems. Jung called this the consequence of severing the psyche from its instinctual roots. You become all head, no heart, all structure, no soul, and your ego identity slowly becomes your prison. The irony is that most people don't realize they're in a tower until the lightning hits. They call it burnout, depression, anxiety, but at the core, it's a spiritual claustrophobia. The lover archetype suffocates. The magician loses his vision. Even the king forgets his purpose. And that's when the soul starts whispering through symptoms. A psychosomatic issue here, an inexplicable restlessness there. The tower cracks from within before it ever collapses from without. One example: a man climbing the corporate ladder who realizes 20 years in that he doesn't know what he feels anymore. Or the woman who's been the perfect mother, yet wakes up haunted by a silence she can't name. These aren't failures, they're calls. The tower doesn't destroy what's real, it annihilates what's in the way. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the voice behind the bricks, the Holy Spirit, the fool, your own buried instinct saying, "Come out." There's more, but stepping outside that tower is terrifying. Who are you without your title? Your tribe? Your timeline? That's the next layer of the fall. Because once isolation is exposed, something even more startling rushes in. Not comfort, but chaos. And it arrives not with a whisper, but a flash, a boom, a divine strike of lightning. The lightning as divine catalyst. Lightning doesn't knock. It crashes through. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It assumes you're overdue. In the tarot, the lightning bolt that strikes the tower is no ordinary force. It's divine intervention with voltage. And while it may feel like punishment, it's actually mercy in disguise. It's the universe saying, "You wouldn't leave this prison willingly, so I'm burning it down for you." That strike is sacred. It bypasses logic and goes straight for the unconscious like a spiritual defibrillator. People think awakening is a gentle process. It's not. More often than not, it comes as a breakdown, a betrayal, a sleepless night that lasts a year. That lightning bolt is what wakes the magician from illusion, the king from pride, the lover from codependence. Jung called these moments numinous, encounters with the divine that shock the ego and awaken the deeper self. It's the crack that lets illumination in. And yes, it usually hurts. The beauty of lightning lies in its unpredictability. You can't prepare for it, but you can honor it. Sometimes, it's a panic attack that shows you your job is killing your soul. Other times, it's an offhand comment from a stranger that shakes your worldview. These jolts aren't random. They strike exactly where the dam is weakest. They are interventions, not accidents. The spiritual touch of this energy doesn't wound to destroy, it wounds to awaken. In Greek mythology, Zeus used lightning to re-establish divine order. In Kabbalah, the lightning flash is the path from Kether to Maketh, the divine descending into form. In Jungian terms, its individuation forcibly accelerated. Lightning cuts through ideology, bypasses the persona, and leaves you face to face with the raw truth of who you really are. No filters, no edits, just you and the rubble of what no longer serves. It's terrifying. It's holy. And just when you think it's all chaos and smoke, something unexpected happens. In the middle of the fall, clarity flashes. You begin to see what was never stable to begin with. And amidst that sacred fire, the seeds of rebirth begin to glow. But for those seeds to grow, something else must first collapse. The very identity you thought would save you. Psychological rebirth and inner liberation. When the tower crumbles, what's left isn't emptiness, it's space. That's where psychological rebirth begins. In the tarot's imagery, the falling figures aren't just victims, they're initiates. They're being flung from a structure that no longer holds truth. The lightning didn't destroy them, it freed them. And the fall? That's the moment the ego dies just enough for the self to start whispering. It's not about losing your identity, but shedding the false layers that kept your spirit caged. It's in this very space that individuation takes root. What begins as trauma or existential shock becomes a doorway to something sacred. Think of those rainbow-colored spheres sometimes depicted in modern tarot decks, symbols of divine promise, echoing the rainbow covenant of Genesis. Destruction is followed by grace. The covenant isn't external anymore. It's inside you. Your pain becomes alchemical material. And yes, this rebirth doesn't look pretty at first. It looks like doubt, confusion, maybe even despair. But that's the thing about transformation. It rarely asks for your consent. It asks for your surrender. Spiritual growth happens not in comfort, but in the moments you thought would break you. A breakup that leaves you sobbing on the floor. A loss that splits your world open. A diagnosis that makes you reevaluate everything. In those ashes, a new psyche begins to form. One that's not based on titles, appearances, or ideology, but on authenticity and instinctual wisdom. It's often after the collapse that people discover they're more alive than ever. They laugh differently. They cry deeper. They suddenly care about things they used to ignore, like silence, breath, poetry, the smell of rain. These are not trivial changes. They're signs of a soul remembering itself. And it's in these quiet post-collapse moments that the Holy Spirit, or what some call divine energy, begins to shape a new structure. Not a tower, but a temple within. Still, this is only possible if one resists the urge to rebuild too quickly. Rebirth asks for integration, for humility, for listening. And that's when other archetypes step in. The High Priestess with her silence, the Hermit with his lamp, offering guidance not through answers, but through presence. Because after the storm, what you need most isn't another ideology. It's stillness. And maybe, just maybe, you're not supposed to rebuild a tower at all. Contrast with previous tarot archetypes. The tower doesn't erupt in a vacuum. It follows the devil, and that's no coincidence. In the tarot's sacred sequence, this isn't just chaos for chaos's sake. It's a progression of awakening. While the devil archetype binds through instinctual shadow, addictions, illusions, emotional bondage, the tower is what happens when those chains get intellectualized. It's what occurs when the ego says, "I've got this under control," and the psyche responds with a thunderclap. In the devil, the trap is unconscious. You're possessed by desire, driven by primal forces you don't fully understand. But by the time you reach the tower, the game has changed. The trap is now mental, ideological. You're not being dragged down by impulse. You're locked in by belief. And here lies the tragedy. Intellectual pride masquerading as mastery. You've upgraded your chains, but you're still shackled. That's why the collapse is sharper. Because you thought you were free. This transition marks one of the most profound psychological shifts in the major arcana. In the devil, the lover is asleep. In the tower, the magician is deluded. The bondage of the body is replaced by the arrogance of the mind. And just like the myth of the Tower of Babel, the higher you climb on borrowed blueprints, the more certain the fall. That's why spiritual crisis hits hardest when it follows periods of apparent success or clarity. It's the fool's gold of awakening. The lightning doesn't strike ignorance, it strikes false knowledge. That's the kicker. It doesn't dismantle your shadow, it dismantles your narrative. Suddenly, your carefully curated life, philosophy, feels hollow. Your ego identity, built like a fortress, starts echoing with doubt. You thought you were the king, but turns out you were just another prisoner, this time locked inside a belief system. That's the rupture. And it's not just personal. Cultures, religions, entire civilizations can face this archetypal fall. But here's where the tarot starts to whisper a deeper truth. What if this destruction isn't just collapse, but passage? What if the fall from mental rigidity opens a gate to something more balanced, more internalized? That's where other figures from the deck reemerge, silent, humble, grounded. Because after the pride and the crash, the next step is always to remember what you once knew as a child. How to listen, how to feel, how to simply be. Contemporary analogy and personal reflection. It's easy to treat the tower as myth or metaphor until it hits you in real life. And make no mistake, it does. The author once described being publicly humiliated at a gathering. Nothing dramatic, just a dismissive joke at the wrong time, in front of the wrong people. But in that instant, something cracked. That seemingly small moment was a lightning bolt, tearing through layers of ego that had been carefully constructed over years. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was revelation. That's the thing about archetypal crises. They often wear mundane clothes. Your tower might not be a house fire or a breakup. It might be a subtle glance that makes you question your worth. A rejection email after months of pouring your soul into a project. Or waking up one morning and realizing the life you've built isn't yours. It's your parents', your culture's, your algorithms. The jolt is internal, and that's what makes it divine. It's a silent boom only your soul can hear. When people talk about falling apart, this is often what they mean. Something as simple as being ghosted, overlooked, unfollowed, or dismissed can trigger a flood of existential shock. Suddenly, the structure collapses. Your thoughts, emotions, even bodily sensations revolt. And in that free fall, the ego panics, because its carefully built tower no longer shields it from truth. That's not just psychology. That's sacred dismantling. What makes these moments potent is their ability to unearth layers we didn't even know existed. You begin to see how many of your decisions came from fear, how many of your beliefs were inherited, not chosen. The psychic dust settles, and all that's left is a raw version of you. Hurting, yes, but honest. And in that honesty, there's power. You become more real, more awake, and far less interested in rebuilding what fell apart. And yet, as the silence returns, a question begins to form. Not about what was lost, but about what archetypes now emerge to help rebuild. Maybe it's time to invite the Hermit back into the picture, or the High Priestess with her sacred stillness. Because after the chaos, what the soul longs for isn't noise, it's a different kind of presence, one that listens deeper than words ever could. Integrating tarot archetypes in daily life. After the tower has fallen and the smoke clears, there's a strange kind of silence that settles in. It's not peace, exactly. It's more like the quiet after a storm, when everything still drips with truth. That's when other tarot archetypes begin to step forward. The Hermit appears, not to preach, but to illuminate. Lantern in hand, he invites you inward. You've been loud long enough, he says. Now listen, this isn't a retreat, it's a recalibration, a reintroduction to your own inner sanctuary. The High Priestess, too, plays a vital role. She's not just passive femininity, she's instinctual wisdom. She doesn't shout, she knows. In a world addicted to external validation, her archetype teaches the power of spiritual introversion. After a tower moment, it's her stillness that heals. She reminds you that not everything needs to be shared, explained, or rationalized. Some truths are meant to be felt in the marrow. Like the Hermit, she's an antidote to overstimulation, a mirror reflecting what's real beneath the noise. But how do you actually integrate these archetypes into your daily life? Start small. Take a walk alone without your phone. That's the Hermit. Sit quietly and observe your thoughts without judgment. That's the High Priestess. Light a candle with intention. Journal about a recurring dream. Rethink the way you rush through silence. This isn't esotericism for the elite, it's spiritual hygiene. Archetypes aren't abstract. They're alive in your breath, your rituals, your resistance to stillness. What makes this integration powerful is that it bypasses ideology. It doesn't matter if you believe in tarot, astrology, or psychology. These archetypes are human blueprints. They speak in feelings, images, energies. The more you listen, the more you start to live in tune with your internal seasons. The Hermit reminds you that withdrawal isn't weakness, it's preparation. The High Priestess shows that sensitivity isn't fragility, it's access. And in the aftermath of collapse, these traits become survival tools. Over time, you stop fearing silence and start craving it. You recognize chaos not as punishment, but as a clearing. And most importantly, you realize you don't need another tower. You need rhythm, presence, groundedness. Because even as life begins to rebuild itself around you, you know, deep down, that another fall is always possible. And strangely, that awareness brings comfort. It humbles you. It softens you. It prepares you for the universal truth that no one escapes. Universality of the fall and spiritual humor. Everyone falls. That's the punchline. The king and the beggar. The mystic and the cynic. No one escapes the archetype of the tower. And that's oddly comforting. We're not failing when we fall. We're participating in something ancient, something shared. It's part of the human contract. The illusion was thinking we were the exception. But once you get that, you can almost laugh at the whole thing. Not mockery, but the sacred kind of laughter that comes with recognition. Ah, here it is again. There's something deeply human in the absurdity of it all. You spend years building a persona, perfecting a plan, following the rules, only for one weird sentence, one chance encounter, one unexpected shift to knock it all down. And that's when people say things like, I never saw it coming, or it didn't make sense. Of course it didn't. The tower isn't about logic, it's about truth. And truth, when you've been living a lie, always feels like an ambush. What softens this blow is empathy. Once you've tasted your own fall, it becomes almost impossible to judge others in theirs. That friend who lost it after a breakup, the coworker who spiraled after a demotion, the neighbor who had a midlife crisis at 32, you get it now. You've been there. Maybe not in the same way, but close enough to know that pain isn't measured by size, it's measured by rupture. And rupture is always personal. This kind of spiritual humility births a new kind of community, one built not on performance, but on presence. People who've walked through fire tend to recognize each other without speaking. There's a certain humor in the eyes, a knowing shrug, a willingness to sit in silence. That's the post-tower fellowship. You stop needing people to have it all together. You just need them to be real. And strangely, it's this simplicity that feels like grace. So no, the fall isn't the end. It's the punchline of one joke and the setup for another. Because now that the ego has tripped, what rises in its place isn't just survival, it's soul. But that soul, raw and wide-eyed, doesn't rush to rebuild. It waits. It watches. It smiles. And in that quiet space of not knowing, something new begins to flicker, a light that isn't built but born. So now that you've seen the tower, not as a curse, but as a sacred interruption, what are you going to do with that awareness? Will you keep patching the cracks in a life that no longer fits? Or will you allow the old structures to fall, so something truer can rise from the ashes? Remember, it's not your breakdown that defines you. It's how you interpret it. That lightning didn't come to destroy you. It came to introduce you to the version of yourself you've been avoiding. Maybe it's time you finally met them. Ask yourself honestly, where have you built towers to avoid feeling? What beliefs are you clinging to that were inherited, not chosen? What part of you is begging to be struck awake? Don't be afraid to name it. In naming it, you reclaim power. And once you reclaim that power, the archetypes don't just remain on paper. They come alive in your breath, your choices, your silence. That's not mysticism. That's maturity. So here's your invitation. Stop running from collapse. Embrace it. Let the High Priestess show you how to listen again. Let the Hermit remind you of your own inner light. Let the Fool take your hand and leap. The divine is not in the tower. It's in the fall. And if this spoke to something inside you, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and stay with us. Because the next time your world shakes, you'll know it's not the end. It's the beginning of something too honest to be ignored.